so I'm starting to talk quickly, and then Daniel and I are here to answer your questions. I hope to have to talk through in not too much time. We have a lot of time for questions. It's at the end of the hour of the session. What I want to present you is a proposal that we have written in spring this year. That we have discussed with a lot of people at the Wikimedia Foundation, that we have discussed with other people, and it presents basically a way towards Semantic Wikipedia. So I think in this room there actually are a few people who might remember this slide. This was the cover slide of the very first talk we had about Semantic Media Wiki, which was in 2005 at Wikimania in Frankfurt. Marcus, you have been there. Daniel, you have been there. Anyone else who has been there at that talk?
You was sure.
Yeah, I gave the talk. Yeah. So back then we were talking about this great idea of combining semantic web technologies with Media Wiki, and we didn't have a line of source code or anything. It was just like an idea. And people liked it so much that they actually started developing it. It wasn't even us that started the development of the thing. We didn't know PHP back then, and we didn't really want to code at all. And there were some companies, I think it was DocCheck, who started with the development of Semantic Media Wiki. And they lacked a few things, so we did start learning PHP and improving the code, and the rest is history, I guess. But the original idea that we had back then already was not to create a semantic media wiki. This wasn't our intention. Our intention really was a semantic Wikipedia. What if Wikipedia's data was accessible, would be queryable, would be readable by machines? And now, 6 years later, we're getting to a point where we have a proposal of how we could do that, and we're trying to pull together a group of people to actually make it happen. It's called Wikidata, and what I'm going to present you today is the what is Wikidata, the why Wikidata is cool, even though I might skip that one, and how Wikidata could happen. So what is Wikidata? There's been an implementation I've done last year called Shotipedia. I don't know if any of you saw it. It was for the Semantic Web Challenge in Shanghai. The idea of Shotipedia was basically to take the semantic media wiki software that we had and add a few user interface thingies on top of it. So if I have web access now, let's see, I want to give you a quick demo of stuff. Oh, just remember something? Offline. Okay. So the basic idea of Shotipedia is that you have a page like Berlin. Actually, this one is pretty much empty now. And we pull in data from all over the web about it, like for example the Wikipedia entry is being displayed. Then it goes out, you can enter labels in different languages of it, short descriptions for it. And it goes out to the web of data, finding entities about this page. Like here, it, for example, discovers this Berlin from the FU Berlin page. So you can say, yep, that's pretty much the same thing, so you bind it. And now the system knows, so this external URI means the same thing as this page. And we can go through what it has about Berlin, for example, and copy things to the page. For example, we have this parent country property. Well, let's add a binding for parent country that could be something like country. So we map it to in which country this is okay. This sounds like the right property. So we map it to that. It's mapped. And Deutschland, let's see how to map that. I think it's probably Germany in this wiki, because we are in a German link right now. So Germany is a Western European country. We map this to Germany. And now we have a triple here that we can just add to our Berlin page. Click on plus, and it's now in the and it's now displayed here. Oh, it's not displayed very well actually. It should display with the right labels. not sure why it doesn't do that. It's a very prototype thing. I did it in basically a month or something. So you should see here country, Germany, but it doesn't work really well. It also contains always a source for every triple that you have inside. For example, we could add further sources for this, like a CIA World Fact Book or whatever. It also says that Berlin is in Germany. ISU. And so on. So for every triple you have, you can actually add sources and things. If you add facts, like let's try this again with the country, you also have this auto-completion inside here, so you can choose it. Now this one works. And we can switch to the German version of this page, in which case we will see this triple we just created just in German, hopefully. Land Deutschland and so on. So you basically, whatever you added, even if I would edit it here now in German, the thing also is being added on the English page and so on. So it's always translated. You can edit it in any page, in any language, because you can read it in any language. You can add sources to any fact you have. You can pull in data from the web of data, doing mappings on the way and so on. So here it actually worked with the mapping, but for some reason the translation didn't work. Sorry for that. And so on. So basically it's Wikipedia, this system that we presented at the Semantic Web Challenge last year. Any questions on that for now? It is a semantic media wiki system. Oh yeah, I can talk about the underlying implementation. So it is a semantic media wiki system, but honestly it's abusing semantic media wiki a lot. So you see that we don't have any kind of wiki text actually anymore here. Everything is done with what is still in German, sorry. Everything is done just with forms that are done on the fly, that are displayed on the fly, and all the data is just machine readable. There's nothing, there's no free text anymore. And if you look at the source of this, erase. It's just a whole bunch of template calls, so it's never supposed to be looked at as a source or anything. In the history, though, it looks a bit smarter because we know what's going on, and so we can add actually what's being happening here, but still not too nice. It's really abusing the whole semantic media wiki system in order to allow for very quick implementations of the ideas that we wanted to show here. Okay. So much for Wikipedia. So basically, Wikidata, the whole Wikipedia code, by the way, has been released this this month. Also, you can just download it and use it. It's available from the Vrandečić website, who have sponsored the development of Wikipedia. Wikidata basically is just an extension of those ideas, but being done properly. So without much of the clutter that you see in the user interface, basically having a simpler system. So again, one of the ideas here is not that we have the truth in Wikipedia about anything. We don't say the population of Seattle is 600,000, but we basically always say Seattle is 600,000 according to specific sources. So for each piece of data what we have, we always keep the sources. This is especially important in Wikidata if you think about the fact that we're doing multilingual editing, that we're doing multilingual adding of data and changing of data, because in that case we don't want to have people discuss what is really the number of people that are living in Palestine. You actually want to have people to add those things and then only discuss according to the sources, is there really this number inside that or not? And so you want to reduce the number of discussions in basically any case. The project plan itself consists of 3 phases. The first phase is to externalize into-wiki links from Wikipedia into Wikidata. So instead of having, as it is today, on every single Wikipedia page, links to any other Wikipedia page about the same topic in all the other languages, we would have one place where we say, okay, this is the entity page about Germany, and it's represented in the German Wikipedia on this page, in the English Wikipedia on this page, in the French Wikipedia on that page, and so on and so on. And you only have it once. So this reduces the maintenance for these things a lot. And I was actually shocked recently when I was looking at the number of edits for year pages. So for some reason I was looking at how many edits have been happening to the pages about specific years in Wikipedia. What I wanted to see is other specific years that have that have more interest in other years. But what I found, there is a huge amount of edits that are basically, more than 90% of edits for most year pages are just editing the interwiki links for this year page. So they just go in and say, oh, we've been added to Uzbekistan as well. Oh, we've changed the link to the Malayan Wikipedia or whatever. So basically all the edits that happen for specific years are interwiki edits. And this could be simplified a lot by externalizing the interwiki links to its own page. What we do at the same point, as soon as we externalize the interwiki links, is that we create an entity base for all the entities that have Wikipedia articles. So we get unique identifiers for those, we can reference them, we can use them, we can give them labels in a different language, we give them short descriptions. As you have seen, those are needed for all kind of things, for disaggregation, for example, and everything. So all of these things, as soon as you have the entity base, or even small pictures, for example, would also be a nice idea to have on the side, but let's see what happens. So all of these kind of things we would already do in the first phase by having this entity base. Once we have that, the second phase is to externalize the data that currently is, or at least partially, currently is in info boxes. So the, I actually have slides for each of those phases. Let's see if the set is all working. Yeah. So in the second phase, the info box augmentation. Currently, each article, as you know in Wikipedia, calls, if they have an info box, calls a template of this info box and provides parameters to populate the info box. So a city might call the city template, add a population parameter, add the mayor as a parameter, and so on and so on. The idea in Wikidata is to centralize this kind of data. So instead of providing them as parameters in the template call on the city article, you would just call the template for the city, for example, for the info box city, and the info box itself could then look up in Wikidata the required parameters. This has the advantage that you only save them once for all the wikis. So you can set up, even in small languages, pages for cities and countries they don't really care about, and still be sure that their population number, that their geographical location, and this kind of things will be current and correct. Because you only have to maintain this data in one place, and all the languages just pull this data in from the central repository. It's basically like Wikimedia Commons, but not for images, but for data. That's the whole idea. And so you populate this info box out of the central repository. From the technical side, we're still extremely scalable, because all we do is just look up. We don't do any queries in phase 1 and phase 2. We only look up one data item and look at its properties, keys and values. The third phase is, on the other hand, is the one that's technically the most hard one. Basically, inline queries in Wikipedia using the old format. So here the question really is, what kind of backend will we choose? What kind of backend will support what kind of queries? What kind of queries will be needed, etc., etc. So we really don't know currently what to use in the backend and what kind of queries we may support in order to create visualizations in Wikipedia that are based on Wikidata, to provide lists in Wikipedia that are based on the data in Wikidata, etc., etc. Okay, any questions about what we are doing here?
Yeah. You said that there can be multiple sources for the data.
Yes.
Case number 2. What if in my Chinese wiki I refer to, I don't know, small town in Germany, and there are conflicting sources for, let's say, the population? What will be this data?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
Okay.
No, I don't know, but I know that we have been thinking about it, and one way to do it, of course, is you set up for a specific wiki a list of a preference list of sources, where one wiki would prefer one set of sources, and another wiki would prefer another set of sources. The problem is that set of sources is huge, so this would be kind of hard to maintain. But it will be something like that.
It could also depend on the thing that you actually displaying, right?
Yes.
You might trust NBA.com for basketball players, something else for something else.
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, probably the most useful thing is to use some default source that's probably easily corrected, and then provide the link to all the other numbers as well, so you can actually dig in the data quickly and see this.
What if you click on the 3 sources? We can pick the data from a source?
No, in this case, it will just display you what are the sources for the given value if you click on 3 sources. But you can click here on other values to see even more values. That's it. And probably there should be a number like 7 other values or whatever. It will make more sense. Marcus?
What about other metadata? I mean, this suggests you have a core field.
Yeah.
But what about something like time? For population numbers, even if there are 10 sources dating back to the 70s, it might not be my preferred number.
Yeah.
So, how many things will there be? Will this be triples or quadruples or pentuples?
No, there would be just a way to give additional metadata to every triple. There wouldn't be fixed fields for metadata for each triple.
Actually, besides the obvious source and time, there can be stuff like units of measurement, error margin, stuff like that. So depending on what kind of value you have, there's a whole range of I think, type of annotation values you might want.
User rating.
So how do you do the revision control in this case? Because the data from different source, you use the data from different source, you have your own revisions in this case.
I don't understand the question, sorry.
So how do you track the history of this data here, like the population from the
We just track what's explicitly given. We don't automatically look up in this other source what they say there. I rather envisioning bots or other system that can take the source and actually let me hold this question for a second because I'm going to get back to this. Okay, but it's a very good question. Okay, for now? Good. The second part is why we need Wikidata. I'll just go quickly through the goals, and I have slides for each one of these points. First, provide a database of the world's knowledge that anyone can have it. Sounds nice. Second, collect reference, quotes, sources for all of these data items. Third, engage a sustainable community that collects data from everywhere in a machine-readable way. So it's not just about providing this website where you can, and it's a Freebase does this mostly as well, but Wikidata, since due to its close working together with Wikipedia, has the opportunity to actually create incentive structures that are sustainable, where we can believe that there will be actually people entering this data and caring about this data in the long term. Fourth, increase the quality and lower the maintenance costs of current Wikipedia. And last, deliver software, the Wikidata extensions, and community best practices, our experience that we have, that enable others to do similar things for their different fields. For example, for other research areas where they want to collect primary data with a system like this, or for other things, similar to what Semantic Wikipedia today is doing, basically, but with some of those extensions. I said I have slides for each one of those. Actually, I don't want to spend too much time on the whys if you don't have questions on it. I just want to, because Jesse already asked, go into one thing about the sources for each fact that we have. So one of the things that Wikidata wants to do is that for every fact that we have inside of the wiki, for example, Starbucks is founded in Seattle, that you can mark up some text on some wiki on some external page and say this supports the statement. So the wiki will save this page and this statement, and actually the actual sentence that supports it. And you could automatically, probably using a bot, check if the external page is still there and still claiming the same thing. So this is one way to increase the reliability of the data by actually being able to automatically check this kind of things. On the side way, you also create a quite nice resource for natural language processing, obviously.
Do you think it really scales, like for millions of facts to check this library?
Yes.
You would, okay.
Yes, I think it does. No, I see your point, but
it's not nice. It's checked it very, I guess.
You don't have to do it every single day over there. I mean, as I said, the wiki doesn't have to do it automatically. It can be done by what as long as the data is provided in a way that they can be externally checked.
I would say it's probably, I don't, the actual tool to pick out cache websites, select, that's not part of this proposal, but it may be built as well, but it's not part of the core.
I didn't write it in, I thought I did. Oh. Okay. We need to check that. It's not
I mean, I think it's a useful tool among many useful tools which could be used for reference gathering.
Yeah. Okay. Unity. So, do I need to go into details about the whys or? Okay, I do the same question that I did in Hi-Fi Wikimania. Everybody who thinks that this is a good idea and doesn't need further convincing, please raise your hand. Okay, that's fine. You need further convincing, but okay. So I don't need to talk further about the why of Wikidata. Let's go to the how, because since we're here on this about media wiki, this might be a bit more interesting. Here's the necessary architecture diagram. It doesn't say anything. So the basic idea, it's built on top of Semantic Media Wiki to have further extensions that you can access. But yeah, whatever that means. The interesting thing is that basically the Wikipedia wikis and any other wikis as well, any other media wikis, would have a Wikidata client extension that can access the data inside of Wikidata. So basically, imagine that you can write queries to not your own knowledge base, but rather to the Wikidata knowledge base. That's the whole idea of it. External websites would also query this. We would provide APIs both for writing and reading the data inside of Wikidata. So also that you could create apps or sites that added specific parts of Wikidata in a more efficient way. Or for example, in a mobile app, you might have specific parts that are really easily editable on the fly. One of the ideas, where just like a Tremolot, is to have casual encyclopedic, basically simple apps that allow you to say, yes, this looks good, or no, this should be further checked, or whatever. So the data is easily displayed and that you can further edit or change. So there are some technical differences to Semantic Media Wiki. First, we need the possibility to annotate statements somehow. In Shortipedia, we faked our way through it by basically displaying as if the statements were annotated, but are not really annotated in any way. This is not represented in the data model inside of it. And those annotations would basically be the sources, and probably some kind of context like time or other contexts like the unit of measurement or the exactness of measurement and so on. Unlike normal Semantic Media Wikis, we don't have free text anymore. We do have text fields that might include some text, like for example the short descriptions about what they are, but just in order, and there will also be the discussion pages and so on that are obviously still free text. But the entities themselves don't have a free text field where you describe the things. Basically, that's what Wikipedia is for. Because we don't have this free text, in the main entity pages we would save the whole structure not as wiki text that uses the Semantic Media Wiki or something, but rather have them saved in an already structured way. For example, JSON with the data or whatever, so that it's faster to reparse, easier to use internally, and also more standardized than using semantic media syntax. Also, we expect that some backends will probably deal easier with the JSON annotation objects instead of just having the semantic media wiki annotations. Questions here? So, this is about the incentive systems of Wikidata. Why do we think it will work? Why do we think that people will actually edit something? So the first phase, the incentive is not about creating an entity base. The incentive is about reducing the maintenance costs of interwiki links. Basically reducing from quadratic costs, as it's now, to linear costs in the number of wikis, which is a big reduction. As said, we have around 260 languages in Wikipedia, and some articles, like countries, actually do have those 260 languages translated, or at least 200. Which means that there exist 200s times 200s interwiki links between them, which is 40,000 interwiki links, which are currently entered inside of those wiki pages. There are a lot of bots that help with it. There's a whole ecosystem of bots that help with keeping those interwiki links up to date and so on. And this ecosystem of bots is not always necessarily helpful, because what you get is a situation, for example, where you realize that someone has aligned two articles that don't belong together, and you think, oh, there's no problem, I just delete the interwiki link, right? And so you've resolved the problem with this wrong link. But what happens then is, well, you delete it in your wiki, and then the Wikibot comes and says, oh, there's a missing wiki link because of the other wiki, I do still have this link there, and starts adding it again to the page in your language. You actually have to go through all the languages and split them up the whole way, knowing in which language the entity is describing the entity you are talking about and which is not. And do this fast enough for none of the bots actually to revert your entries in the meantime. Otherwise, you simply cannot do this today. There's no way to do it. So we would help with that in the first phase, and this is where what we would like. In the second phase, in the info box phase, again, we're not telling the Wikipedians, oh, just gather some data about it. But we're actually telling them, in order to make info boxes simpler than they are today, in order to hide the template calling from the users, in order to simplify the approach, and in order to reduce maintenance costs, well, go ahead and add it here and then put it into your info boxes. The info box template syntax itself will get a little bit yuckier again, but not much really, because it is pretty horrible already. So instead of calling template parameters, you would be calling Wikidata. That's the only difference. And if you make this somehow easy, then it doesn't hurt much. On the other hand, the actual articles, which are the ones that are edited most, become much, much simpler. If you today go to the article on Germany on the English Wikipedia and click on edit, the first thing you see is basically 2 pages of template calls. We can get rid of most of these and reduce it to maybe 1 or 2 lines. And finally, for a lot of articles, we will be able to automatically create sub-articles in many, many languages. So today there is no article on Brač, for example. It's a beautiful island in Croatia. I can only tell you to visit it if you don't know yet. So there's no article on Brač, for example, in many languages, which is a horrible situation. And you can go ahead and automatically create it for most of these as soon as you start translating the labels for the properties, as soon as you start translating the entities. So the translation problem becomes linear with the number of entities instead of in the combination that you actually needed for translating those things. So again, it's the incentive structure for the second phase. For the third phase, the incentive structure is also pretty obvious. Today, if you go to Wikipedia and want, for example, add a nice visualization that depends on current data in some way, for example, show bar charts of the population of cities in your region. If you do it, you can add it, you can create this visualization, add it to Wikipedia, and leave Wikipedia again. After 2 or 3 years, your visualization gets a little bit out of date. So that's one of the reasons why people actually don't like doing these kind of things, because they know that it will get out of date, and they don't want to become the maintainer of this visualization. And so at some point, the visualization is either to be removed because it's out of date, or it has to be redone by someone, which does happen for articles that have a very high visibility, but it doesn't happen for those small articles. If you replace those visualizations by queries that are created automatically, that are generated automatically, you can actually create much more much more attractive visualizations, even with interaction inside, concurrently possible, and be sure that they still stay up to date. So you increase not only the quality of Wikipedia, but also its attractiveness, its interaction that you can have on the site, the attractivity of the page, and so on. And not only in Wikipedia, but basically anywhere. Because the whole system, like Commons, is not closed to be only used by Wikipedia, but you can use it on any website out there that you want to use. Okay. I think that's it with the overview of the idea and of the current project proposal. I want to open the floor for questions from you to Dan and myself. We still have time. We do. More than half, a quarter of an hour, basically. Yes.
What about the timeline of your proposal?
The proposal has a timeline of a year. 12 months, basically. So have the first phase in, I think, 3 or 4 months, the second phase a bit longer, and the third phase in the last few months. Now, when it starts, I cannot tell you because I don't know that answer. This depends.
Really soon now.
We hope so. We hope so. It depends on gathering funding, basically.
Well, I would say the timeline is a year once we have the people we need to do it.
Yeah.
So the first step, or the step 0, phase 0, was actually hiring or contracting. So that also adds a bit.
Oh, this organization. I would like to start like 3 months ago.
Tomorrow?
But it's not really a decision I can make. So, but the proposal looks for a 12-month project, basically.
Maybe erst mal ask who does design?
Sorry?
Who does design about? May I ask this question?
We gave this proposal basically to the board of Wikimedia Germany to look at it, and they have decided that it's a good proposal. We talked with the Wikimedia Foundation and got a lot of input from them. We discussed it with the community at Wikimania. We discussed it in several places. We have it up on the wiki, the proposal completely. We didn't get negative feedback. We didn't get any negative feedback yet, which surprises me completely, to be honest. Which makes me a lot of happy. Which makes me very happy, to be honest as well. The decision in the end is by the community, but as it looks right now, we have very strong support from the community and from everyone involved in Wikimedia.
I think usually you only get real feedback once you start doing stuff.
Right.
So as soon as something goes live, as soon as the InterWiki bots get shut down or something, people will start noticing.
Yeah. So, but yeah, you know, I mean, the Wikipedia decision process isn't a really clear-cut one.
Did you have a dinner with decision makers?
There is no single decision maker, and
well, basically, Wikimedia Foundation said they wanted something like that, but they were not going to do it themselves because they do operations, and they are pretty much caught up with that. And Wikimedia Germany said, yeah, well, perhaps we could do it, and well, and in the end the board decided, yes, it's a cool idea. If we don't have to pay for it, we will run it. So that's basically what we have now.
And there was a big discussion in the last 2 years about strategic plans of Wikipedia, and the structured data proposal was part of this. So, I mean, I think that we can claim quite strong and broad support from Wikimedians in general. And no one told me that I'm not allowed to say that. But it is a tough question, it's a tough answer. I really don't know how to answer it.
Well, basically, Anja just reminded me that basically the kickoff was a meeting at SMWCon, right? The Wikimedia organization invited a bunch of people who are interested in that kind of thing to discuss how to make it happen. And yeah, this is basically what came of that. That was in February?
Or something like that.
You want to ask something for a few minutes now.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts of what the syntax would look like within pages to display the interwiki links or the info box data, and would it basically be ASCII queries or something different?
I have ideas. Well, basically, for an info box, you are just asking for one entity, the properties of one entity. So you basically have something like, give me the properties of entity X and passes to template Y for formatting.
Yeah.
Something like that.
I'd like something like, I'm just saying from top of my head, it's not written down here because we have to discuss it, but I would like something like curly brace, question mark, population, slash template, curly brace.
You still want individual properties. I just want to ask for the entire thing as a whole, so you just...
And
whatever.
And you have a sources issue, right?
Sorry, what?
You also have to say from which source you're going to trust.
Yes.
The source preference, well, usually in Wikipedia you would only query things from the Wikidata instance that Wikimedia is running. But in there, of course, you can have filter for information from individual sources. And the source preference could be probably per call, per page, but the default would probably be per wiki. If you have to specify every source preference for every property on every page, that would be crazy. I mean, that just wouldn't be possible.
But in short, we don't know the answer yet.
I really want to avoid to have to specify this kind of call for every property. But
we're putting out a thought of it, but we don't know fixed answers.
Everyone's asking about interwikilinks.
Well,
For interwikilinks, it's actually easy. Sorry, for interwikilinks, we do have the answer. Sorry, I was thinking about infobox. For interwikilinks, basically, you have a magic word that either switches off or on. That's all. You don't need anything else. So
why don't you just, instead of filtering by source, why don't you just allow the author of the individual article in the individual language to specify which data items they want to pull?
Sure.
You know, there's a default set of data items, and then they say, in fact, I'm writing the Croatian Wikipedia on Brač, and I want this item. Right? And it comes over with the source.
Yeah.
And that way you don't have to have a filtering system, and that way you don't have to use a long list.
This assumes a way to edit templates with more intelligence than currently is there.
It just means you have a default and a selection mechanism.
So this will happen in the long run, definitely. But as long as the new parser and the new edit infrastructure for Wikipedia is not there yet, we have to think about simple edit boxes. That's the only thing. But you're right. As soon as we have that, it becomes much easier.
I think one of the things in NeuroWiki we've looked at is this problem of filtering by source. You know, say you have a lab and you want to say the mappings between brain geometry and genes are going to come from the Allen Institute and not from Scripps, let's say. And you have to do this efficiently, right? And it can involve, you know, maintaining multiple copies of caches of things that have been pre-computed. It's just at least our initial designs say that can turn into a nightmare. And we're not looking at anything like the number of sources that you'd have to have in the complete.
Another approach is also that the sources themselves will be saved inside of Wikidata, and there they can detect, for example, a community and say, oh, this is a very reliable source, and so this is something that you can use for meta choosing sources.
this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely.
So just keep it simple.
Yeah, keep it simple as 721.
I think one thing I really want to mention is where is this compatible with what we have now for semantic video? I semantic media wiki as it is will be reused. And I think what we mainly can reuse is the presentation layer, the formatters. I mean, there's a huge ecosystem of formatters out there that would be really, really, really useful for Wikipedia. I'm pretty sure that several of them will need some work with respect to scalability, but that I think will be the main thing.
I think there's some more things, like some of the gardening tools as well and others. But really, also one part of the project proposal actually suggested, actually writes it that at the end, we'll look at what has happened with the Wikidata extensions, what are the changes we did, and how to bring it back in track with the normal semantic media wiki development. So we would like to have as much as possible from Wikidata flooding back into semantic media wiki and not split up the project at this point. It's just that during Wikidata itself, our focus will lie on the actual Wikidata website, which is just an instance. But afterwards, we have to think about how to gather this great community and also have to connect it with the software. So that's for the future to think about it. We did think about that. We realized that this is an issue that was real. Marcus?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Denny just said. I think at the moment it's actually more important to clarify these main goals that we all share than to really have the technical detailed discussion, because some of the things which came up here seem to be something to be decided once there is a team, once there's a project. And there will be a lot of discussions there, but it's probably not the forum where we can solve that now, because there will be many more considerations to be taken into account to find a real technical solution for each single thing. But I think having the main goals outlined and having many people agree now, including Wikimedia, is a huge achievement and is a huge step forward, and that's what we can be very happy about now, and hopefully that the technical things will follow.
For your information, I forgot to put this on the slides. I had it on the last one. The technical proposal is actually public and it's on Meta. So if you go to the new Wikidata page on Meta, you will find a complete write-up of the proposal and can read up there on many details. So it's been public since IFA basically, which is a month and a half.
And it has been popularized by the budget discussion for next year. Wikimedia Germany just published their budget proposal to the community, and it's being discussed now, and as part of this, the Wikidata proposal has been popularized and is now slowly making its way through the community.
Further questions? We still have some time.
I think what is in fact impossible, but something looks like, because it's a very complex system. I think the main issue with Wikipedia was that it was the encyclopedia worldwide where anyone could edit and take part.
Yeah.
And I think it's going into a direction where this is more and more dedicated to developers, because no one else will be able to see through it.
Well, actually, I completely disagree.
And
I don't know what this code then looks like.
basically,
I
the code for what? For the actual data representation, the Wikidata, there will be no source code. You will never ever edit that as text.
Yeah.
Because all you have is you have a form-based input, and that gets serialized and saved to the database. There is no intermediate, well, technically there is an intermediate text layer because that's getting serialized, but you do not edit that. So there is no syntax.
So
it will probably be JSON or something, but it doesn't matter.
It should be easier for the end user to actually add data, edit data, and change data. That's the whole point of the thing, is to make it simpler. You have this form-based version and not more complicated. Actually, I think that the current system with the template calls and never mind template syntax itself is actually unsustainable and only edited by very few people. I did some analysis on the English Wikipedia just to see how many people are editing some templates. So for example, there are templates that are used on hundreds of pages that have millions of views per day. It has been edited only by 5 people in the whole world. This is not the usual way of having more eyeballs leads to more quality. And I think that we can actually make it easier editable again than it's currently.
If it's the right direction, which is shown by all these forms, like these form plugins you have already in Wikipedia. For the German Wikipedia, it's Vorlagenmeister template assistant. You have exactly something like this form you just saw, and people really like to use this instead of writing the templates themselves or filling the templates.
And this is actually also something we envision, that editing the values you see on the page would be done inline. So to change a value you see in an info box, you don't have to go to that other project and find the page and do whatever there, but you just click edit and fill in a form and it goes wherever.
So you have all these web service calls that you can call for editing. You can just edit it on Wikipedia in the end, and it will be saved in Wikidata. Well, that's the idea. Obviously, there are a few technical problems to solve in the way.
Do you have linked data on your radar at all?
Yes, absolutely. Everything will be exported in standard formats. RDF being one of them. And JSON, the other one. Actually, I do have a few problems with the RDF exports, so if you want to help,
it's also a conceptual problem, of course, how to... The data model we propose is not one that is easily expressed in RDF, of course. So on the one hand, there is you could just say, okay, we throw away all the source information and all that, and just output down to triples, and it's enough. And on the other hand, you could say, okay, we just reify everything and model all the meta information on top of it, and live with all the overhead. And somewhere in between, maybe it will be just options. Maybe we have one and the other. Maybe we'll figure out something nice in between. This is to be seen.
Yeah, but we definitely want to export everything. Not just as a big one dump, but also for each and every page. We will have also this one big dump that then, for example, which also can upload and provide a sparkler endpoint or something, as to do with data Wikipedia. One of the things that we will want to have is a sparkler endpoint, probably, because just...
Yeah, Wikimedia is the one that wants it.
Actually, you were just bringing up the Wikipedia. It's kind of interesting to think about how this would interact with or influence the development of the Wikipedia. Because, of course, the data collection that Wikipedia does at the moment would be, well, in the end, hopefully we will have the same data in there. But Wikipedia has been doing a lot of work on mapping to standard vocabularies and, I don't know, cleaning up data so you get a nice hierarchy of, I don't know, places and stuff like that. And I think this will be extremely useful in building the ontological basis for the data we need.
Are you aware of our mapping wiki?
Yeah.
Okay. I know that it's there. I have looked into it once or something.
But to make one thing very clear, the goal of Wikidata is only to provide a technical platform. We're not providing a content at all.
Yeah.
So it will be the newly to be created community about Wikidata that has to decide which data sources maybe to take automatically and so on. It's nothing that we will or want to decide because it's not our job.
Just curious what your thoughts are.
Oh, my thoughts are... my thoughts are very different, but speaking as the one who's going probably to lead this project, our job is not to deal with the content at all. We're just providing the infrastructure.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember us talking about if you define data sources, and you would probably define Wikipedia Lite as a data source, you could propose values.
Yeah.
And you could say, well, this source gives us this value, do you want to take it for this entity?
Absolutely.
This is not imposing it to people, to users, but to suggest.
And what the architecture even allows is that someone can externally and actually quite easily write such a proposal and just push the data to Wikidata in the end, because we will have all the user interfaces to add data to Wikidata also in a RESTful way. So you can easily write an external web page that does nothing else but gather a specific source and allow you to just say yes or no or whatever. And you don't even have to have it in the user interface of Wikidata. You don't have to.
No, you don't have to. The only problem I see with that is that to which user would these changes be attributed. That's kind of a, but it's again a technical issue. We need open auth for that. Then everything.
Yes, I agree. Now we're running a little bit over time. You're still around, and then I don't know what it is. I will be around tomorrow.
I will probably also be tomorrow.
Okay. And if you have further questions, just grab to one of us and ask.
Oh, one more thing. We are looking for people who will work on this with us. So if you are interested in that kind of thing, talk to me or talk to Denny.
Yeah. Okay, so thanks for the attention.